Good day, everyone. This is Teaneck in Focus, Denise Belcher. I'm here with my co-host, Dwayne Harley and Seleene Lewis Wong. And I'm super excited today that we have a special guest that is with us today to talk about development. And we have with us Chris Brown, who serves as the Director of Community Development for the City of Hoboken. He manages a department that ranges from land use and redevelopment, housing inspection, rent control, and administration of a community development block grant program. Under his leadership, Hoboken has adopted several transformative redevelopment plans and agreements, initiated the collection of development fees for various affordable housing initiatives, and overseen an expansive rent control and stabilization office. And we're so happy to have Chris with us. He also serves as chair of our planning board here in Teaneck. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor
Welcome.
Belcher, for the invite. Thank you, Dwayne.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Celine.
You're welcome.
Yes,
Great to be
yes.
here with
Our
you guys.
pleasure.
Great. Our pleasure indeed. So we wanted to have you on because we are here in the beginning of March and we are uh, dealing with a lot of affordable housing obligation requirements, as are many municipalities. And we just wanted you to come on and talk a little bit about, what does all this mean? We're faced with, redevelopment discussions, redevelopment plans and agreements and so forth. We're being told that we have certain obligations that we have to fulfill for this fourth round obligation for TNEC. And we want you to kind of maybe talk a little bit about what does all this mean? Why were we given a calculated amount of 431 affordable units from the government to fulfill over these next 10 years? And what does this all mean in terms of even vacant land adjustments and so forth? So I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can explain to us and our residents what does all this mean.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the really cool thing about New Jersey is we have this affordable housing statute. We have a mandate, constitution. The state has every municipality has a constitutional obligation to provide affordable housing, and that comes from the Mount Laurel case many decades ago, where the Supreme Court um, struck down a municipality's zoning for being exclusionary, and from that from that court case there has been several rounds of legislative action and several rounds of legislative initiatives that put the current situation that we're in today. So we started with we're in the fourth round. So there's been four rounds of obligations. So we're in the fourth round of obligations, and each round the state basically says you municipality have to provide X number of units. And not some municipalities are exempt. Some municipalities are urbanates. The municipality that I work in, Hoboken, does not have an obligation because historical factors, just like in other Newark, Patterson, and that's been discussed widely in this round. But generally speaking, every municipality has this constitutional obligation to provide this number. So where does the number come from? Comes from the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs. There are factors, there are like um, there's a concrete methodology for how each municipality has its numbers. I graduated in 2006, and I graduated grad school in 2006, and at the time there was this thing called growth share. So you grow, you owe. And so every municipality had to kind of figure out what their obligation was using a methodology. And so I remember spending hours trying to figure out what a couple of different municipalities down South Jersey's obligations were. And um, through lawsuits and challenges, that was put to the wayside. And so we're in this situation where the DCA is essentially coming up with these numbers and giving them to municipalities. And the uh the 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 way that the affordable housing statute is carried out today is different than it was, say, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. There used to be a organization called COA. Council on Affordable Housing. And we say that synonymously in the state. A lot of planners still, attorneys, they still use the term COA because that's what was in place for, I want to say, the first round, second round, um, part of the third round. And then at some point, COA was disbanded, and we have the system where it's now in the courts, and people can that can be a whole podcast in itself.
Yes.
Sort of opinions on how that works, and should COA come back, and how does the court system work? But essentially, the way that compliance is met is through the court. So a municipality has to petition the court for declaratory or petition the court, and start through that process to the end where you have that substantive compliance. And in round four, that has been sort of that the legislation has been one where where developers can petition municipalities to be included in their plans. And we've all these deadlines that we've been running, that we've been adhering to, have been results of the fourth round. The latest statutory legislation that's been handed down from the state. So we've had uh, what were the dates last year? We had June 30th, which was the
Yes.
housing element master plan. Then we had, what was it? I want to say
September.
September. That was the
Yeah.
time
Mhm.
for petitions to be granted. And now we're here at the March 15th or March 16th deadline for ordinances to be adopted. So all of that is the result of the state legislation and the court system, which we are a part of.
Right. Yeah, there are a lot of dates, a lot of responsibilities, sometimes not as easy to navigate, but nonetheless, to your point, we're all, required to do so. So let me just ask you this, is just in general, like the where we are in terms of the number of units. It originally DCA had came back and said 431 affordable units. How did that number come down to roughly a 105? A lot of people have asked that question. 431 units is for this fourth round, which I understand is a 10-year period. But then we had this roughly 105 number of units that must be built. Is that what must be built, or is that just pretty much what we're looking at in terms of the projects that the housing element speaks to?
So taking a step back, because we could go into the housing element and kind of see the way that the 431 number was addressed through different credits that the planner topology stated within the plan. But generally speaking, when we say that these units must be built, every municipality has to make a good faith effort to ensure that these units are planned for. So so if someone has an obligation of 400 units, that number has to the municipality has to show that there are ordinances in place, that there are plans in place, that the town is taking all the steps necessary to address that constitutional obligation. So in terms of how a municipality it, it, in, it, the idea of we have to build this, or what happens if we don't build this, what happens if we get to 50 units instead of, or we're 50 units short, what happens? I mean, that then gets addressed in round five, when the state comes in and says, all right, well, you have this prior round obligation that you didn't address, and how this, and at the time the legislation would then account for that 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 I'll say surplus of
Sure.
credits.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. Okay. So when we talk about I think Dwayne, you had a question. I'm gonna throw it to you for a minute because I could go on for a minute with talking with Chris about development.
Well, thanks, Denise. Hey, Chris, thanks for coming on.
Of
Appreciate
course,
you for your wealth of knowledge. You
of
talked
course.
about the affordable housing, that the mandate from the Mount Laurel. a decision that happened. And you know, if you listen to our podcast, we covered that. I think a couple episodes back.
We talked about that,
Um,
yeah.
right. But there's a mandate that the municipality, as you stated, we must come up with a certain amount of units, right? And I believe Teaneck had requirement for a developer to come in, and it's supposed to be 15% of the units to being built, but now that increased to 20%. That increase that TNEC agreed to do, or you know, mandate to do, do you think that would be a detriment, or make it a little bit more difficult for developers to want to have an initiative to come into TNEC and develop based on they have to now have 20% affordable housing opposed to the 15%?
So I mean, 20% isn't out of line with a lot of municipalities around the state. So 15 to 20% are more the standard, um, than not. So that's number one. Generally speaking, if a developer is being required to provide more affordable housing, if there's like say 10 a 10 unit obligation, let's say 20 units, right? So you're going from 10% to 20%, you're going from 1 unit to 2 units. So one of the market rate
Mm,
units becomes affordable. How that affects their financing, how that affects their rate of return, yeah, that makes an impact. And if that's decreasing profits or revenues, yeah, that's gonna have a detrimental impact on potential financing or the desirability of a project. That being said, um, that 20% is not out of line. Many communities
mhm,
around the state have that percentage. And if we are working towards meeting our constitutional obligation, that's that's the township's um, prerogative to make that increase because that's the
Mhm.
vision of how we are going to address that obligation.
mhm. Okay, awesome. I mean, Teaneck is a great place, so hey, we want to raise the number. You know, people really shouldn't argue too much with that because everyone wants to come here.
The
Right.
the the one side of that is if it depends on the zoning ordinance, right? So if um what 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 you'll find is if the affordable obligation goes up, some developers will say, well, then I need a pilot, or then I need extra density to cover the set aside. So
Mm,
if it's a planning board zoning project, you might see it could be a larger project. Someone may come in for an extra story of units or an extra floor of units. Could be, but that's how you get the affordable units.
And
got
but
it.
to your point though, I just to segue in terms of pilots, I mean pilots oftentimes are not looked favorably on by, residents or in terms of, why would we want to do that from a tax perspective? Can you speak for a moment in terms of like rental units versus projects that are more resale? In our town, we do have a recent project that we did a few years ago that was townhouses. Yes, the price point's a little higher than rentals, and I would think that developers may have a pushback from the standpoint of okay, it's not financially feasible. But from a municipality standpoint, to have individual condominiums where you can bill each individual unit, property owner, that type of analysis might be favorable for a municipality when it comes to ratables. What are your thoughts?
As a policy, I think town should encourage more condominium development. Because if you have couples coming in, if you have people looking to start a household within the township, um, having that extra product being available, as a alternative to a single family house, that's that could be an attractive alternative. So the more condos we provide, the more alternatives we're providing people, um, in terms of options coming into town. I mean, I moved into town a few years ago. We bought a single family house, but we considered condominiums, um, and there's downsides to that with HOAs and having to deal with the intricacies of that. But um, it's never a bad thing to have that as an option. That being said, and then on the other side of that, um, the question of pilots, yeah, pilots aren't necessarily a bad thing. It's just about how you negotiate them, and it's just about is making sure it's the right pilot. Schools always get their money. Schools are always going to get their levy. It
Mhm.
could be that there could be impacts on the facilities. There could be impacts on um, the number of kids coming into the district, and that's a question of like, is there space for students in the district? But it's really the onus is on the township to hire a professional to do the analysis to make sure that the pilot works. I don't know if you, I wasn't writing down your question, so
No,
was
no,
there
no,
another
that was
question that
good. That was
embedded in
good.
there?
Yeah, I mean, and your answers are great because it kind of leads to the next question, and that is you speak about, the township doing hiring the professionals to do the analysis. Oftentimes I hear people will say, well, why do we have to decide on something now? We haven't even had the impact studies. So when you speak for a moment about impact studies, like, well, of course, impact to schools, but what about impact to transportation? Particular, like, if you're bringing in hundreds of units into a town, what about New Jersey Transit? What does that look like? Shouldn't we engage earlier than later when it comes to impact studies on drainage, on traffic, on various things like that?
Um, I mean, yeah, actually, you 1000% have to do due diligence before a project is as a project is coming down the pipeline. Um, with with study, so there's two different tracks, right? So there's the municipal land use law, which is, we sit on the planning board all together. We hang out every couple of weeks. Next week we're gonna have a lot of quality time together. Um, yeah, next week is gonna be a thing. But we serve on the planning board, and so that is statute. That the statute there is the municipal land use law, and then the other statute is the local redevelopment and housing law. And with planning board applications as they come in, that's a one night thing, right? Like the board is looking at it at this time. You make your case, present your proofs, and they absolutely need to present those studies in terms of this is the impact of the project. We're going to have our board engineer, board planner review this. Board engineer, board planner, tell us what you think, and then we make a vote. Redevelopment's different because there's several other steps, right? So you have to adopt the redevelopment plan. And then once you adopt the redevelopment plan, the council negotiates the town negotiates a redevelopment agreement with the developer. And so those and then once they have that redevelopment agreement, they're going to the board. So the plan is the zoning. And if you put it in I there's there may be some need. I'm not going to say 100% that there's not, but there may be some need to do a study for the zoning. But generally, when you're doing zoning, you're looking at bulk standards. You're looking at um, height, use. Redevelopment plans are a little more robust because they go into larger visions for an area, in terms of how those requirements uh, meet how those requirements support the plan, right? Like, so for example, Cedar Lane. Uh, if there was a redevelopment plan for Cedar Lane, you'd say, these buildings have to be 4 stories, 40 feet, and they have to be this much setback from the road, and the color of the bricks will be blue. I'm making it up. But that's and so we put all that together, we adopt it, and then the town would then negotiate redevelopment agreements as they come along. And with those redevelopment agreements, a developer is going to say, well, I may need an extra story, or I may need to, I want to just conform right to the plan. And this is how I'm going to, uh, this is how this project is going to impact the area. And um, here's the study that shows my case. So I think it's more so the agreement phase where those studies really make an impact because the town is negotiating that agreement directly with the developer and they're really squaring away the project. So you really need to know how this specific site is is fitting into the area, and you need those studies at that time because you're essentially entering into a contract with that developer.
Right, but some would argue, Chris, that to wait until the redevelopment agreement to do the impact studies is late in the game. That it in fact, looking at redevelopment, looking at impact studies during the redevelopment plan is a better place to bring along the community in terms of buy-in. What are your thoughts on that?
So yeah, no, it's not a, I don't think it's an either or. I don't think it's there's only one way to do it. You could require those studies for the plan. Um, you could,
Mhm.
but in order to really, again, the thing that the part that really has the teeth is the agreement. So say somebody comes in, developer comes in, with, or not developer, town does a redevelopment plan for a site. And the the town does a redevelopment agreement for a site, and they say, look, we want to make this 4 stories, and we want to X amount of units. And but but we want the property owner to create a study. Um, the fact that that whole process that I just mentioned, the town, like, let's take a step back, like, because I think what you just mentioned is essentially a developer led process, right? Where like the town is getting an impact study with the plan. I would argue that the better way of doing it is the town sees a piece of property, the town sees Cedar Lane, the town sees Teaneck Road, and here's the vision for this redevelopment plan. Here's the vision for what this corridor needs to be. Here's the vision for what this area needs to be. That's not the time that you get a study. That's the time where you're talking to the community. That's the time where you're talking to residents. That's the time where you're having those workshops and you're seeing what that area looks like. And the property, and then so you adopt the redevelopment plan, and then you have the property owners that you've just upzoned their property, potentially upzoned their property, um, for the benefit of the area. And you're saying to the developer, all right, now you can come to the town, but you got to come with these studies, and you got to come with like how this site is impacting the area. So like
Right.
I see what you're, so I would kind of reframe the thinking of, um when we're asking for studies, we're saying, prove to me that, prove to the board, prove to the governing body, prove to the town that this site is not going to have this kind of impact on the area.
Right.
And
Adversely. Yeah. Yep. Mhm.
and I th- I don't think that that's necessarily a that's probably better suited for the redevelopment agreement, for the reason of the plan is the time for the town to put together the plan that it wants.
Division. I hear what you're saying. I totally agree. And speaking of such, community meetings. I mean, to your point of engaging the community, we have made every, concerted effort to do that in terms of, the how does the community, um, how do you get buy-in from the community unless you have community meetings and you have discussions about it? And then even taking a step back when you say, after having that, then you engage with, which a developer to come in and be a part of it, and maybe even taking going out to bid for, this is our vision of this redevelopment plan, you know, open the doors for multiple developers to come in with their vision of such. I feel that that's at the point of being able to say, okay, let's look at the analysis of both, having this as rentals versus, not versus, but in addition to resales, and so forth. We know we have an affordable housing obligation we have to fulfill, but in this point, this is where we're bringing the community along, and we have community involvement. We have and we have um, developers that are coming forward, and they're basically able to say, this is what we're able to do. But I totally like the idea. The whole idea is having the visioning. So one question I have is the
Yeah,
master
I,
plan.
I
How
I
does
have a question
Yeah,
on that. I'm
sure.
sorry. I just
Mhm.
have a quick question. Going back to the impact study, could the could the agreement be subject to approval of the impact study? I guess at this point, if the agreement has already been kind of hashed out and they provide the impact study at the time of the agreement, can the agreement be subject to approval of the impact study? Because what if the impact study is like, the agreement is there, and the impact study is like, okay, we didn't know all these things was going to happen, and we don't really like the results.
I think the agreement. I I think what you're asking is was there language in the agreement or in the contract in the resolution, or is there language in there that says this agreement is approved subject to this agreement, this impact study being approved? And
Correct.
there's 2 points of that. One is the town could just the municipality can hold off on finalizing that piece of whatever component, drainage, traffic, until that impact study comes in, right? Because the town should be at the driver's seat of this of development because we control our land, right? Like we control what happens within our town. The other piece of that is, yeah, I mean, it's not uncommon to have a redevelopment agreement that says, um, the this the a study needs to be submitted and approved within, um, a study needs to be submitted to the town within a month or 2 months of the agreement being the effective date of the agreement, and will be reviewed by the township engineer or whoever, and will be approved at some point. So, a developer would say, well, then I want some sort of a time frame so that this doesn't go on indefinitely, and that goes back to the point of,
Mm.
well, just don't adopt the redevelopment agreement until you have everything squared away. But you could put something in, but you could theoretically have something in there, a contingency that says you have to submit this by the X amount of days, and we're gonna sort it out in at some point. I mean, if it's not a big deal, if it's something that's like a minor thing, then you can say, submit it within 30 days or 60 days, and then we'll have everything squared away. We'll language in the agreement that says we'll um, have an approval by 180 days or something, in theory. But that's at the purview of the town. But to that point,
Mhm.
again, they just don't adopt the agreement. All right,
So
hold
is
off.
is there a time frame between redevelopment plan and redevelopment agreement that it could be virtually any amount of time for the most part, right?
No, yeah, you can adopt the redevelopment plan and you never end up with a redevelopment agreement
Mhm.
because things break
And
down. I've
right, things. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I have there's a in Hoboken we have a few um plans that unfortunately we've been we're 10 years in and haven't gotten an agreement. The market changes, maybe the plan parameters didn't work out. Things happen, but there's no time frame per se.
Sure. Cost to build, people
Yeah,
confused about what a tariff is in terms of construction material,
exactly.
the cost of labor. I mean, I'm sure all that factors in. But one of the things, Chris, that we hear
Uh,
repeatedly.
let
Yeah,
me
go ahead.
when
Mhm.
I should say a lot of times plans have a 30-year window. They could have a window, so a 30-year, 40-year window. So after 30 years, it goes back to traditional zoning. So
Mm,
there
I
is there
see.
is
I
the
see.
longer time frame that the plan is in effect, but there's you don't really there's nothing in there that says we shall do this by 2 years or whatever.
I see.
I
Okay, I
have
just have
one.
one question before I turn it over to Seleene. I'm gonna throw it to Seleene real quick, but this is kind of related. One of the questions that we hear quite often is about the master plan, a document that's technically owned by the planning board. It is a product that is outputted by the planning board. And many residents ask the question, is the development, um, in compliance with the master plan? Does it follow the master plan? If you could talk just for a half a minute about, you know, what does that look like? I mean, how is a master plan used in redevelopment plans within our township and projects?
Yeah, master plan is an overall policy guide for development, not just development, but overall policy guide for growth within the municipality. It could not just development, it could be we have community facilities that are outdated. We have utilities that need upgrading. So it's just the future growth of a municipality. That's how you're charting your future. So and not just redevelopment, but anytime a zoning ordinance, anytime a development regulation is adopted, and there's two different references in municipal land use law, and there's a reference in the local redevelopment housing law. Anytime a development regulation is adopted, it has to conform. It has to be determined to be consistent. It has to go through a consistency review by the planning board. So, and that's just is this development consistent with the goals and objectives of the master plan?
Hmm. Great. Thanks for that. Seleene, you had a question?
Actually, Chris, you have answered all of the questions that I had. I was going down the line here, and I'm like, I don't have to ask any questions, but I do want to just tie it in before we end that you mentioned in the beginning that you did go to grad school. We all work with children, and we do want the youth to be listening to this. And this is very important. This is a lesson not only for, of course, for our Teaneck residents, but also for our youth who we really want to be involved and also may want to do what you do one day. And you mentioned you went to grad school with all this confusion and all the things going on, but they want to be like you. How do we position ourselves that our youth could actually do something that you do? And where did you go to school, undergrad, if you don't mind asking, in grad school, for those who are entering college and are listening to this and kind of need this kind of education, a lesson that you're providing for all of us.
No, I appreciate that. I played a lot of SimCity growing up. My mom,
Okay.
I played a little too much SimCity. My mom would have to like come and with the my mom's Antiguan, so it's like there would be a broom and like get it off the computer. It's too late. And
Right.
s- but um but when I went to SUNY Buffalo, University of Buffalo. I'm from the Bronx,
Okay.
as many of us,
As all of us.
us outer borough kids are, right? So I went to SUNY Buffalo, went in as I switched a couple of majors, went to African American Studies because the courses just really spoke to me, and I took a class in slavery and Underground Railroad. And
Wow.
Buffalo, the east side of Buffalo, there is a church that was the site of a destination on the Underground Railroad, and the professor was looking at a way to make the church have it designated as a historic property so that it would
Mm,
then become an economic engine for that neighborhood. And it was like, this is really cool because now we're not talking about the problems anymore. Now we're talking about the solutions.
right.
And that really that really stuck with me. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. I was thinking maybe I'm a teacher or something. And I had a conversation with someone, and they could like, you could become you can play some city for the rest of your life, and and it all kind of like clicked together, like, oh yeah, wait, this thing, that thing, and I spoke
Mhm.
to a couple people, and I guess the succinct answer to your question is, um, talk to people and just like figure out what you want to do, figure out what your passion is, figure out something that you really love doing, and that wouldn't feel like a job, and then everything kind of falls into place. Fortunately,
So basically,
Great.
you have to play SimCity. Got it. No. No, thank
just
you
let
for
your
that.
kids play video games, I guess. It all just
Yeah.
No,
works.
thank you for that. What you said was very important, and I hope that when the youth are listening to this, especially our high school children who are going into college and they're trying to figure things out and may not know this may be something they would like to do. So I thank you for sharing that. And so we're going to close out with Denise.
Yeah, no, I think that was a great question, Celine. And one of the things I just want to say is that, we encourage residents to include young people to listen in to our planning board meetings to
Right.
see what the planning board really does, and scope of all this development and applications and site plans and so forth. So, we definitely are in person. People can come out or they can Zoom in just to listen to keep up to date as to what's happening, all the activities around town. There's a lot that goes into planning our township, and we want to get it right. I often say that, we want to get it right when it comes to making decisions about the future because our youth, speaking of our youth, is going to inherit this. And we want them to be able to look back and be proud as to what we're doing and what plans we've made and what decisions we made long term. So I just want to thank you, Chris, and I want to give you any parting thoughts that you have, any words that you have regarding where we are as a township and the future of planning in general for our town.
No, thank you for the invite. Appreciate joining you all and having this conversation. I would say we're all blessed and fortunate to live in such a walkable inner ring suburb, um, close proximity to both New York City and forests up if you just go, a little bit, few minutes, 20 minutes north. Um, and we're just really fortunate all to be here and to be neighbors and to making this town as the best version of itself as possible.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you so much for your time tonight and have a great day.
Have a
Thanks,
great one,
Chris.
Thank
guys.
you, Chris. Take
Talk
care.
to you
Have a
Thanks,
good
soon.
night.
Chris.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Good
Talk to you
night.
soon. Have a good night.
You too.